Let's start our podcast. Hello, this is Tony Brewer from the We Talk Truth Group, and you're listening to Cogitations. Cogitations is the podcast where we talk about all things that pertain to life and godliness for Christians today. And you never know what kind of topics we'll be discussing on the We Talk Truth podcast or the Cogitations podcast. I don't know where I am. Haven't had my coffee yet this morning. So this is Cogitations. Daniel wrote in the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 28. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. Well, we're not going to keep the matter in our heart. We are going to talk about it. That's the idea. And I think I quoted that verse right. Hitherto, I've quoted it so much now I do it and I don't even realize it. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me. But I kept the matter in my heart. Again, we're not going to keep the matter in our heart. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, today's Cogitations is about comparison, resentment, and murder. And we had a good summer youth series last night. Had like 60 young folks here at the Bay Church of Christ building. And I delivered a lesson, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the lesson from last night. Comparison, and the theme was the making of a murderer. I don't know if how many of you watched on Netflix this documentary about the making of a murderer, but basically we took from 1 John chapter 3, if you don't love your brother, the same as a murderer. In fact, let me just go read that. Let's see, verse 15 of 1 John 3. Whosoever hateth his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer hath eternal life abiding in him. Well, now listen, that's profound, and it's kind of deep. So I broke it down this way. First off, go back to the Cain and Abel story. And I'm teaching this to young people. So I was preparing the lesson, and I got to thinking about the making of a murderer, and I got to talking so much about, thinking so much about a murderer from the standpoint of you're going to murder somebody else. I got to thinking about it from the standpoint of a murder that you're going to murder somebody else to a murderer as you're going to murder yourself. And I got to thinking about teens, and I got to thinking about the suicide rates in teenagers, because teenagers are funny. They're not adults, so they're not fully independent and able to take care of themselves, and they shouldn't have thrust upon their shoulders the responsibility of a full-grown adult. But yet they're not children either, and they can take care of themselves. They can be a little bit independent, so they're not really. They don't have all of the safety nets and in other words, a 14-year-old can be tried as an adult. And if a 14-year-old snaps and does something really, really bad, a 14-year-old can be tried as an adult. But yet they're, the part of their brain that understands long-term consequences of actions isn't even developed yet. So they're not children. They're not adults. They're just in this in-between stage, and a lot of times they don't know what they are or where they fit in, and somebody tells them when to wake up, they tell them when to go to bed, they tell them when to go to school, they tell them what studies to pursue, they tell them which college they're going to, they tell them which vehicle to drive. A lot of times they're told what they've got to wear, and they don't feel like they're in control. And it's hard. I mean, it's difficult. It wasn't so long ago that I was a teenager, and I know how difficult it is. My two teenagers, mine and my wife, two children are teenagers, and we kind of give them a fair bit of leeway. We're very, 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 very strict in certain areas, but in other areas, they have control over their own over themselves. I spent a lot of years training dogs and horses, and I know what it means to give the entity that you're training time for you not to be lorded over them. You've got to set them up for success and then use them in the areas where they excel. So with our two children, we've set them up for success, and we try to use them in the areas where they excel, and that seems to help them. And not every parent is as conscientious about that as LaBeth and I when it comes to how to deal with their children. So what's happening in the world today? Suicide. You understand suicide is on the rise. Just before the podcast this morning, I was doing some research on the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, leading causes of death. And number 10, okay, the 10th leading cause of death for all people is suicide. Check it. The 10th leading cause of death for all people is suicide. But now listen to this. Now you listen to me good. Ages 10 to 24. Okay? Now this is going to be huge. Ages 10 to 24. The suicide accounts for 19.2 deaths, or 19.2% of the deaths ages 10 to 24. Ages 10 to 24, the leading cause of death is unintentional injuries. Unintentional injuries. The second leading cause of death, the number 2, now listen to me closely, ages 10 to 24, the second leading cause of death is suicide, ages 10 to 24. Once you pass through ages 25 to 44, suicide jumps down, but it's still high. It's the third leading cause of death above heart disease. It's the third leading cause of death, and it is above heart disease. Okay? It's unintentional injuries is still high at the 25 to 44 crowd. But suicide and other, I don't know what other is, but that's causes of death that just aren't specified or something like that, I suppose. 19.2% of deaths ages 25 to 44 is other, that's unspecified. But suicide accounts for 10.9% of deaths in ages 25 to 44. Now, when you go to ages 45 to 64, it drops down much lower, and suicide only accounts for, now listen to this, once you pass age 45, suicide only accounts for 3.1% of the deaths. But in ages 10 to 24, it accounts for 19.2. Now, I think it's very interesting that in ages 1 to 9, this would be almost infant. Suicide is not even on the pie chart. But ages 10 to 24, suicide is the third leading cause of death. I know, I'm like, that's amazing. Now, why is that? Well, again, I was looking at this lesson in the theme of making of a murderer, from the standpoint of the perspective that I'm going to be making a murderer and I'm going to be killing somebody else. But in actuality, if I kill myself, I'm still a murderer. So how could I get from a healthy, normal, good, functioning human being, loving God and doing what I'm supposed to becoming a murderer where I kill myself? Well, the first thing that I want you to notice, and I didn't present the lesson like this last night. I'm presenting this way differently than I did to a group of teens. First off, you've heard the two greatest commandments in the law. Thou shalt love thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, strength, and mind, and might, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And you've heard this acronym, JOY, joy, Jesus, others, self. You're supposed to put Jesus first, others second, and you third. That is absolutely hogwash. That is wrong. That is terrible. You're not supposed to do that. Put Jesus first, put yourself second. Then take care of others. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Built into that rule at first is a love of self. You've got to understand that you are worthy of the vocation wherewith you were called. That Jesus looked at you and he gave his life for you and he loves you. All right? You are a precious soul made in the image of God. You deserve life on this earth. I cannot stress that enough. You deserve life on this earth. You are an individual. There's nobody else like you. You are fearfully and wonderfully made, the psalmist says. Who are we that God is mindful of us after he made the heavens and the earth and all that in them is? I mean, he made Saturn and all Saturn's rings and the majesty of that beautiful planet so far away. And he still made Tony Brewer. He still made mankind. That's amazing. Listen, I don't want to buy into the left-wing social justice warrior hogwash. Mankind is a fallen species, and we need the redemption that can be found in Christ. We need to be better than what we are, but we are still, at our very essence, human beings that are fearfully and wonderfully made and made in the image of God. We have a divine spark, which means we have an intrinsic worth. So it doesn't matter what other people are. It doesn't matter what other people do. It doesn't matter how good people look on Instagram or how good people look on Facebook. Everybody's got problems. Everybody's got problems. When you look on Facebook, when you look on Instagram, all you're seeing is the best parts of somebody's life. You're not seeing the worst parts. You're not seeing the bad parts. That couple that takes that selfie in front of that Mercedes Benz, that might not be their car. That couple that takes those selfies whenever the husband's kissing the wife on the cheek and they all look all lovey-dovey and stuff like that, they could be having extreme marital issues. You don't know. All you're seeing is the highlights. Look, if a football game can last 3 hours, but you can watch it in 3 minutes if all you look at is the highlights reel. A baseball game can last longer than 3 hours. And for somebody that don't like baseball, it's about as boring as trying to watch AstroTurf grow. But if all you do is look at the home runs, you would think it's a very exciting game all the time. The problem is we compare ourselves all too often with other people, and it's an unfair comparison. We shouldn't even be comparing ourselves on a fair basis. In other words, I shouldn't take the totality of my life, goods and bads, ups and downs, and compare it to somebody else's life, goods and bads, ups and downs. I should be living of myself. I should keep my head down. When I say keep my head down, I don't mean in defeat. I mean, let's see if I can find this verse. You know I can't ever find verses on the fly. 2 Thessalonians, I believe it's 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. Let's see. Furthermore, everyone of you know, right here. Yep, this is it. Look at verse 9. But his brotherly love, it's touching brother. It's 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 9. But his touching brotherly love, ye need not that I write unto you, for ye yourselves are taught of God to love one another, and indeed ye do it toward all brethren which are in all Macedonia. But we beseech you, brethren, that ye increase more and more, and that ye study to be quiet and to do your own business, and to work with your own hands as we command you, that you may walk honestly toward them that are without, and that you may have lack of nothing. Keep your head down, do your own work. Don't worry about the Joneses. Don't try to keep up with the people that have 900 million followers on Instagram. That girl, first off, that girl is maybe a trust fund baby. She spends 6 hours at the gym and she never takes a picture unless it's through an Instagram picture. Don't compare yourself to her. You are beautiful the way you are. You are wonderful the way you are. And yes, listen, I want to be realistic. The biggest room in my life is the room of improvement. And I would figure if you're listening to this, you're more than likely a human too. So probably the biggest room in your life is the room of improvement. I'm not negating the virtue of being real with yourself and understanding that you have room for improvement. But I'm just talking about whatever state you're in, you're the best you that's ever on the face of the earth. And although you could be better, understand that you could be a lot worse. And the fact that you're as good as you are now is a stinking miracle. And it's a wonderful thing. And you just got to keep working on you, man. Don't compare yourself to these other people because it ain't fair. It's not fair to you. And all it does is causes resentment. All it does is causes resentment. And if you do a study, an etymological study on this word resentment, you find that you come up with the idea of rescinding emotion. And the idea is rescinding negative emotion. So you have this forceful emotion that agitates you and you just rescind it and rescind it and rescind it. What happens? You see that picture on Instagram of that family. You see that picture on Instagram if you're a woman. You see that picture on Instagram of that girl. And like, man, she's so pretty. Why can't I be like that? But then instead of saying she's so pretty, that's a model for me to aspire, to whom to aspire, and you make yourself better, you start seeing it as, well, I'm not pretty like that because of genetics. I'm not pretty like that because I don't have the money. I'm not pretty like that because my life hasn't been easy. And then you start being agitated and you just keep on rescinding that stimuli. And then you start building up anxiety and building up anxiety. And then something weird happens. You have all this pressure built up behind a dam. And then one day the dam breaks and you absolutely murder somebody. Now that murder, it could be physical or it could be spiritual. You could gossip about somebody. You could have a chance to build somebody up, but you tear them down. Or you could, as so many of our young people fall into this trap, they say, well, I'm so angry, nobody notices me, I'm worthless, nobody loves me, I'm going to show them and I'm going to teach them a lesson and they will notice me and they will miss me and they will know how much I'm worth and I'm going to take my own life. Did you know that that's why young people commit suicide? Old people commit suicide to escape a harsh reality. Young people commit suicide to show the people around them that they're valuable. And you're like, Tony, there's no way that that's true. You look it up. You look it up. You will find that is true. But how would they know, Tony, that's so illogical? But how would they know that they're teaching the people around them a lesson? It's not logical. Young people are not logical in certain areas. The part of their brain that understands long-term consequences of actions have not developed. That's why they can commit suicide. That's why they understand that they don't understand that suicide is a long-term solution to a short-term problem. Resentment. You compare yourselves to one another. You compare yourself to a bunch of people. And then you start resenting those people, and then you become a murderer. And there's more than one way to become a murderer. You can become a murderer spiritually. You can tear somebody down with gossip. You can put rumors out that causes them to lose a job, causes them to lose a spouse, causes them to lose a boyfriend or girlfriend, causes them to lose a friend, causes them to lose their soul. You could be a rumor monger so much and a gossip monger so much that you could tear a person down to where they commit suicide. I'm going to tell you, I was very emotionally affected by this lesson. And I'm not teaching the lesson here. That is the thing. I went back to Genesis chapter 4 with Cain and Abel. And if you'll notice, go back and read that account. I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to touch all of it. I've been on here about 23 minutes. I've got to get on the road. I've got to get off here and process this and get it online and get on the road to Middle Tennessee. But the idea is Cain, his sacrifice was not acceptable to God, and Abel's was. And to boil it down, Cain was mad at God. Cain killed Abel because he was angry at God, because Cain compared his sacrifice and his response from God to Abel's. And instead of functioning in his own lane, instead of doing his own work, instead of being quiet doing his own work, he's like, why did my brother get special treatment? I didn't. Why was my brother successful and I wasn't? Why couldn't I be successful like my brother? Well, it's God's fault. It's not my fault. It's God's fault. So he can't kill God. So he wants to burn the world down. So he did. He went out to talk to his brother while they were in a field, and he slew his brother. That's what the New Testament says about the word slew. That's Thessalonians. Let's go to 1 John. For this is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. 1 John chapter 3, verse 11. Verse 12. Don't love, or love not as Cain, who was of that wicked one and slew his brother. Now let me tell you something. That's the understatement of the century. If you were to walk into a crime scene and there was a hollowed out torso laying in one corner of the room, and there were intestines strewn all over the room, there was blood on the ceiling, there was a hand over here, a leg over there, an arm over yonder, the head is sticking on the post of the bedpost, blood everywhere, you would say, this person was slain, and you would use the Greek word that John uses in 1 John chapter 3. Let me tell you something. It wasn't a sanguine. I get these words confused. Hold on. Let me get my Oxford English Dictionary. Let's see. Nope, not sanguine. I think saccharine is what I'm looking for. Saccharine is what I'm looking for. Excessively sweet or sentimental? That's I don't think it's a good usage of the word. Anyway, it wasn't a clean affair. He didn't sit down and say, you know what? I believe I'm going to kill my brother because I don't like my brother. Well, no. Whenever he come out in that field, he saw his brother and he started building up anger. And he just got angry and he's tensed up and he saw him, and I doubt he stopped to pick up a weapon. He may have had a piece of material in his hands, an implement with which to do farm work in the field, so he may have used that, whatever. But he killed him, and it was a crime of passion. And I'm going to tell you, it was up close and personal, and it wasn't, in other words, if firearms would have been invented, Cain wouldn't have been satisfied sitting in a tree and sniping his brother from 100 yards away. You'd want this job up close, personal, and bloody. That's the nuance that this word carries in the New Testament in 1 John, and that's the anger that Cain had, and the type of anger, and what happens when that anger is released. The story of Cain and Abel is an archetype for every disagreement in the brotherhood. Every disagreement on the face of the earth, even. It goes all the way back to Cain and Abel. Every one of them. And of course, we've got to be better than that. That story is there for our learning. So, we compare ourselves to other people, and we start coming up with reasons why it's not our fault, but it's this universe that God created. And then we start resenting other people, and we start resenting God. And then we become a murderer. And as I said, I'm going to read these statistics again. Ages, according to the Center for Disease Control, these National Vital Statistic Reports, June 24th, 2019. Okay? This is June 24th, 2019 is when this report came out. Suicide is the third leading cause for death, ages 10 to 24, making up 19.2% of total deaths for children ages 10 to 24. It goes down almost 10% whenever you reach age 25. Your chances of suicide goes down 10%. It's 10.9%, so almost 10%. And then ages 45 to 64, suicide is only 3.1% of the causes of death. So, making of a murderer, you don't have to kill somebody else to be a murderer. You can kill yourself. In this Cain and Abel story, the person with whom you have the greatest conflict, if you compare yourself to other people, the person with whom you have the greatest conflict could be yourself. It could be yourself. Don't do that. It's not healthy. It's not healthy. I'm going to go to the book of Hebrews. In fact, I'm going to go right here. Book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews tells us the remedy. This is it. Let brotherly love continue. Now, if the commandment was to let brotherly love continue, that means they had brotherly love, okay? But let it continue. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware. This word angels just means messengers. They're not talking about heavenly beings. They're talking about people who would be preachers of the gospel traveling around. And the idea was that you might come to a town as a gospel preacher and you're trying to be covert and you're on a mission. You might be having to get from one place to another with information or with a letter or with money, but you still are part of Jewish nationality, which is to whom this letter was written. You might come and you might say, hey, brother Jew, I'm a Benjamite too. Can I impose upon our Jewish hospitality and let me stay a night in your barn or whatever and feed me? And you never know it, but you might entertain a messenger, an angel sent on a messenger for some church or something. All right. Now, verse 3, remember them that are in bonds. Remember them that are in prison, as bound with them, and them which suffer adversity, as being yourselves also in the body. A person who is resentful and compares themselves to other people cannot be empathetic. The Hebrews writer is telling this person, you be empathetic. Think about those people and remember them that are in prison and suffering adversity. And because you could, in other words, it implies that you're able to receive guest. I'll get it right. So your life could be a lot worse. You're having problems now, okay? That's the thrust of the book of Hebrews. You're having problems now. You're being persecuted, but you could be suffering worse adversity. In fact, you could even be in prison. So remember those people as though you were suffering with them and you're bound with them. Don't covet somebody else's wife. Marriage is honorable and all, and the bed undefiled. Don't be a whoremonger and adulterer. God will judge those people. So be married and stick with your own wife. Here's the kicker. Here's the keystone that ties it all together. Let your conversation be without covetousness. That's your life. Let your live in such a way you don't covet anything, and be content with such things as you have. For he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. There it is, right there, that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper, and I will not fear what man shall do unto me. Everybody knows who Bill Gates is. As I said last night, it is rumored, I have heard, that if Bill Gates stopped what he was doing to pick up a $100 bill, it would cost him money because he makes more than $100 in the amount of time it would take him to stop and pick up a $100 bill. I think that's a good allegorical in illustration to just let us know exactly how much money Bill Gates has. Bill Gates should be envious of me. You got it? Bill Gates should be envious of you because you're a Christian. Those people that are in the world that try so hard to tear you away from Christ, that it looks like you're missing out on stuff because you're missing out on the things that they get to do, they should be envious of you. Because they, no matter what they have, no matter what they get to do, you have something and get to do something that they do not. You have a relationship with God. And you get to worship God in spirit and truth. You get the comfort that passeth understanding by laying your cares at the feet of Almighty God. Don't compare yourself to other people. Don't take the worst part of your life and compare yourself to compare it to the best part of someone else's. It's not fair to you. And the only thing that goes down that road is resentment and finally murder. When you compare yourself with other people, somebody's going to die. And it could be you. Don't do that. I'm thankful so much that you decided to tune in to this episode of Cogitations. Please pray for us as we travel. I'm looking there's not a whole lot of comments. I didn't think there would be this early in the morning. And then I just see one comment in the We Talk Truth group. They probably don't mean to. They don't realize how fast they can go wrong. I don't know. Sadly, that comment is it's from 12 minutes in. I don't know what I was talking about when I said that. But anyway, thanks so much for your participation this morning. Thanks so much for sharing these. Thanks so much for, incidentally, the YouTube channel is doing well, and I hope that you would go and promote that YouTube content for people that don't consume podcasts and people who are not on Facebook. Share this with your friends. Share this with the people at church. I have been greatly and wonderfully surprised at the amount of people that have sent me messages that say, I listen to your podcast every single day, and it helps me so much. That is humbling, and it's a great responsibility, and it drives me. First off, I talked to a buddy of mine, and he said, Tony, I don't see how you do it. He said, I don't know who could do what you do. Just the daily grind of putting out content. And I didn't think about it until then. I guess I do. I guess I do put out a lot of content. It's taken years to get to this level. It's taken years to be able to do this. It does require a certain skill set to be able to sit in an office and speak into a camera through a microphone. And think about it. You know, we're on episode 53 now. That's 53. There's only 52 weeks in a year. These podcasts are between 25 and 45 minutes long. I have preached a year's worth of gospel sermons in 52 days, 52 episodes, a little over 3 months, because it's 5 episodes, 5 episodes a week. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. So that's 10 weeks. Yeah, a little over 3 months. I've preached a year's worth of gospel sermons. Not only that, the gospel sermons that I preach on Sunday morning, Sunday evening, devotions on Wednesday nights, class on Thursday morning, I didn't realize how much material I put out. But I love it. I couldn't think of doing anything else. And the more I do it, the more practiced I get at it, and the more overflow of knowledge that I have, and it's great. And I wouldn't be able to do any of this without the good folks that listen and consume the content. If it were not for you, I would not be able to do this. Please never let it be said that I have a lack of gratitude. If it were not for you, I would not be me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And incidentally, if you like to support what we're doing, www.patreon.com. You can become a patron, and I'm going to re-up the exclusive content. Also, the Mindful Soul. That's a project that LaBeth and I started. The Mindful Soul will be. I don't know when the podcast. I've got to re-up. I've got to up the podcast and make sure the podcast channel is good before I release the podcast. But I am putting those videos on YouTube on Cogitations podcast channel. So go to YouTube and type in Cogitations, and then you can go on a playlist on the Cogitations YouTube channel, and you can on the Cogitations YouTube channel, and you can see the Mindful Soul playlist, and they'll have full episodes of the Mindful Soul, and that's where LaBeth and we talk about mental health topics from the perspective of a clinician and a theologian. So anyway, listen, thank you so much. I've got to get off here. I got to get on the road. Say a prayer for me. Pray for my endeavor this weekend. I'm going to be preaching a couple lessons about evangelism, and specifically online evangelism. And God bless you, and we will see you on the flip side.